Good morning for Telesur. I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. The death toll continues rising in Gaza, with more than 2,000 Palestinians dead since the Israeli attacks first began. Most of the deaths have been civilians. Hamas reports that 3 of its leaders were killed in Rafah in the southern portion of Gaza following an early morning Israeli airstrike. Palestinian officials say that following the attacks, a 4-story building was completely destroyed, killing at least 6 people and leaving dozens trapped. And more news from Gaza. The UN Security Council on Wednesday urged Israel and the Palestinians to return to the negotiating table as soon as possible. The group also expressed serious concern over the return to hostilities and casualties in Gaza. The Security Council offered full support to the Egyptian initiative and called upon both parties to reach a sustainable and lasting ceasefire. Palestinian officials say that they are willing to return to the negotiating table. The Palestinian representative to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, says he wants to see lasting peace, but that Israel must stop its ongoing aggression.
Humanitarian ceasefire. The members of the Security Council.
Law enforcement arrested 47 people following protests in Ferguson, Missouri on Wednesday. Demonstrators took to the streets in reaction to another police shooting killing an African-American man. Thousands are expected to gather across the U.S. today as part of the National Day of Rage, an event called by the so-called hacktivist group Anonymous. On Wednesday, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder arrived in Ferguson to oversee the federal investigation into the killing of Michael Brown. A grand jury was convened on Tuesday to hear evidence in the shooting. It could take more than 2 months to hear all evidence and decide whether to indict Officer Darren Wilson, who killed teenager Michael Brown. At least 43 people have died in the last 24 hours in the self-proclaimed People's Republic of Donetsk. In the city of Lugansk, citizens remain without electricity and water due to the ongoing Ukrainian attacks. Meanwhile, thousands of civilians in the east of Ukraine have fled their homes due to the intensifying clashes between Kiev forces and pro-Russian rebels. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, over 415,000 civilians have fled their homes, with the majority seeking refuge in Russia. Russian and Ukrainian officials will meet August 26 in Belarus to search for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. And to Latin America, on Wednesday, victims remain the focus of the ongoing peace talks in Cuba between the FARC guerrilla group and the Colombian government. Today, history experts who have studied the conflict will also contribute to the debate. During the group work, they will emphasize the historical backgrounds of the confrontation and attempt to propose an agenda that could lead to a peace agreement. Friday, 4 senior members of the Colombian Armed Forces will be in Havana to take part in a subcommission that will discuss the end of the conflict, the laying down of arms, and a bilateral ceasefire. And to Mexico, where the Parliament, Congress, and local authorities continue debating the possibility of raising Mexico's minimum wage, which is currently the lowest in the region. Our correspondent there, Clayton Kahn, reports on what a raise could mean for Mexicans.
Estela Alonso is a domestic worker. Although she makes $15 a day, 3 times the amount of Mexico's minimum wage, she says it still isn't enough to feed her 3 children.
It's very tight. I have enough money to buy some food, but not enough to buy bread and milk, which is what my daughters want.
While there is growing public debate over raising the country's daily minimum wage of approximately $5 to $6, Alonso, who lives off the informal economy, says for her it wouldn't make a difference.
Yo no trabajo por contrato, entonces no sé a mí qué me beneficiaría porque
I don't work under a contract, so I don't know how it would benefit me. Perhaps for the rest of the people working with a salary, it would benefit them.
Politicians from leading parties have called for the issue to be debated in the legislature. However, the Labor Department says it can only be considered if the informal sector is reduced and productivity increases.
We believe it's necessary to increase productivity and to share those benefits, to formalize employment, and to decouple the minimum wage as a unit of measure.
Economists argue that more than half of the country's population depends and works within the informal economy.
The people that live off the informal economy in this country aren't just people working on the street corners. The people who don't have a labor contract or the people who are paid hourly in poor working conditions is 63%.
In previous decades, an increase in the country's minimum wage would provoke high inflation. However, economists now argue that an increase in wages would likely decrease inequality, draw more people into the formal workforce, and spur productivity. Clayton Khan, Telesur, Mexico City.
The leader of Thailand's military junta and instigator of the May coup, Prayut Chan-o-cha, has been named Prime Minister of Thailand. The general was nominated by the legislature, which is mostly made up of military and police figures. His election comes during an ongoing political stalemate between the former prime minister and opposition parties. The conflict has resulted in protests and clashes. Prayut has effectively been the de facto premier since the May 22nd coup. Prayut will serve as interim prime minister with elections to be held in late 2015. The San Lorenzo soccer team, crowned Latin American champions, have presented Pope Francis with the Copa Libertadores trophy. Prior to his election as pontiff, Francis was known in Argentina for his passion for soccer and especially for San Lorenzo, his hometown team. San Lorenzo won the final match of the Copa Libertadores last week, beating the Paraguayan national team. Copa Libertadores is one of the most important soccer tournaments in the world. It marked the first time that San Lorenzo has won the tournament, and it is the second major championship that San Lorenzo has won since Francis became Pope in March 2013. More on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day.